I'd like to call to order the Springford Area School District Board meeting on November 27th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Springford Board of School Directors believes the community has the right to bring before the board issues and concerns they may have about items on the agenda or about items in general which affect the district or their children. Because of this belief and philosophy, the board will schedule a time at the beginning and conclusion of every meeting to have an opportunity for community members to share their concerns with the board. At the start of the meeting, members from the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda, then at the end, when prompted, there will be a time for public comment. This meeting is being filmed to be broadcast on community cable channels and online. Individuals intending to make public comments should be aware that they are being filmed. Speakers will be asked to state their name and the area in which you reside before your comment.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight. Ms. Thickert, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, we have Mrs. Deerdorf, Mrs. Hermans, Mr. Jackson, Dr. Motzer, Mr. Schaefer, Mrs. Weingarten, Dr. Wright, and Mrs. Zazowski.
Thank you very much. I don't have any announcements with the exception that the board did meet in executive session twice in the month of November. We met, I believe it was November 10th, the Personnel Committee met to discuss a personnel issue, and likewise the board has just previous to this meeting met in exec session to discuss personnel as well. Mr. Rizzo, do you have anything else?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, we will move, and I apologize, I said November 10th, it was actually November 8th, my apologies. With that said, we're going to move on to public to be heard on agenda items only. If there's anyone that would like to speak, please approach the podium with your name, township of residence, as well as the agenda item for which you are speaking.
Hello, John Yanchuk, Limerick. Speaking on items 2, I think it was C, D, and F. First of all, I want to say we were all heartbroken by the loss of Mrs. Earle. And I also wanted to send a thank you to Mr. Schaefer, Mrs. Zazowski, and Dr. Motzer for their service on the board. I know they did a lot of hard work. I know it was volunteer, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. On item F, Dr. Motzer brought this up in the last round of budget negotiations and voting, but she raised the idea about the wish list that came around for school supplies from our teachers. And I'm sure you're all aware that both Board Policy 110 and state law, Section 801 of PA Act 14, state that to some degree supplies will be provided to all students at no cost. So I think it's frustrating to hear that there were curricular supplies that may have been on these lists that aren't being paid for by the school district. They're either being paid for by teachers out of their own pocket, or they're being paid for by generous, donors who are picking these up off the wish list. So I think this board and the new incoming members should really take a look at that, and they should try the best they can to include all of the supplies that teachers need for the curricular activities, and make sure that none of our teachers have to spend out of their own pocket, and make sure that none of our students are at the whims of any particular donor having the luck of being in a class where someone buys things versus where someone doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
I am Ava Young, 40 Ashley Drive, and I've been playing girls flag football for 2 years now.
And I'm sorry, it was Miss Young? Was that your last name? I just want to double check. Are you speaking to anything on the agenda right now, or is this something outside of the agenda?
Agenda 10B. Sorry.
Thank you.
I am Mary Grace Folk, 215 Hefner Road, addressing Agenda 10B and the Eagles Flag Football Initiative. We wanted to thank Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Miscavige and the Extracurricular Committee for allowing us to present this initiative last spring to the Athletic Department for feasibility in bringing it to Springford. Like I said, this is my second year playing flag football, and many of my teammates already are playing in schools that have taken the Eagles Flag Football Initiative, and I look forward to the opportunity of playing flag football here with my classmates at Springford.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Sullivan, and my address is 44 Montella Circle, Pottstown, PA. And I'm here to speak about item 10, letter D. Girls flag football is a growing phenomenon across the country, even the world. And why wouldn't it be? It's hard to put the feeling into words, but I'll give it a try. When you're on the field, it's like everything disappears. The fear, the pressure, worries about life. There's only you, the football, the end zone. And you fly. Down the field, twisting and dancing, dodging the hands trying to pull your flags, as you try to reach the wild bliss of running over the goal line. Please, I ask of you, introduce this wonderful sport to more girls. It has truly changed my life, and bringing it to Springford will change the lives of so many others. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve Fry, Royersford. I'd like to start with agenda item 2E. Has to do with the standardized test results. I'm happy to see that the publicly available data is being broken down by more and more subgroups of students over time. This year it's broken down by 10 subgroups, but the one subgroup that was missing, which was a little strange, was gender. And I'm not really sure why that is, and I'm hoping that that information is available to you, because it's not available to us. Similarly, when I went to Future Ready PA website, which is another place you can see kind of outcomes, I couldn't find gender breakdown in those outcomes either. So it's a bit strange, and I'm hoping that's not a sign of something. Next, I'd like to move on to agenda item 9A, which involves sending someone to the National Association of School Psychologists conference. As some of you know, I'm interested in certain aspects of EDI. One of those is particularly disparities in gender outcomes in education. And I searched the more than 1,200 sessions listed for the conference, and I only found one that I thought really had to deal with male outcomes in education. I thought that was a bit strange considering the current situation. In addition, I thought, again, from an EDI perspective, I thought it was very unusual that the conference, while it had several different EDI topics in the session list, I didn't see anything talking about representation issues in the industry. Again, that seems to be something we commonly hear about with EDI, but I didn't see anything being discussed. And perhaps that links to the earlier item about not seeing many sessions about kind of disparities with gender outcomes. Also, I'd like to talk about agenda item 9A, the superintendent and assistant superintendent goals, which appear to be shifting from more objective outcomes like test scores to what is being called culture and climate. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that means. I don't remember that being kind of discussed in any other types of meetings, committee meetings. I don't recall seeing a report that said there was something there that needed to be addressed and there was a need to be a shift of focus. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from. So I'm hoping we're going to get some information about that so it's clear to everybody what a focus on climate and culture really means, and also kind of where this transition is coming from, particularly because I think we're going to hear some disappointing results from the math scores later tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, with that said, we're going to move on to our presentations. And first, we are going to welcome Mr. Miscavige, Athletic Director, to the podium to present a handful of different athletic achievements.
Good evening, everyone. We are going to recognize our fall champions tonight. Our first team up is going to be our boys golf team, coached by Mr. Jerry Hollingsworth and Mr. Dan Butterwick. Our boys were the PAC champions this year. They had a league record of 10-0 and 15-3 overall record. In the semifinal match, they played against Owen J. Roberts, and they won by a score of 194 to 201. And in the PAC championship match, they defeated Perk Valley by a score of 191 to 199. So congratulations to the coaches and players. Sophomore, Lucas Kozak. Junior, Patrick Cummings. Junior, Sean McMahon. Junior, Jai Mahite. Senior, Sean Drover. Senior, Charles Farisi. Junior, Bobby Kovaleski. And freshman, Michael Gravenese.
Congratulations. Congrats. 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 Congrats.
Congratulations to our boys golf team. Our next PAC champion is our girls tennis champion, coached by Todd Reagan, Devin Stano, and Karen Canuso. They had a 10-0 league record and were the PAC champions. Freshman Teresa Cheskowski, freshman Paige Collier, Sana Desai, Austin Fallon, Sydney Trotter, Nithya Vadlamudi, Corinne Daniel, Scarlett Wren, Victoria Jacobus, Sharayu Coley, Barkley Trotter, Olivia Zvarik, Jade Kalbach, Alexis Liu, Mia Matrosino, Brooke McPike, Evelyn Mejia, Chloe Moore, Madeline Ritter, and Casey Roan. And secondly, we have a special award tonight for our doubles champions. Would Mia and Evelyn please come to the front? Mia and Evelyn were our PAC doubles champions. They finished third place in the District 1 tournament and were the PIAA champions for girls doubles tennis. So congratulations, ladies. You guys can go. Thank you. Thank you to all the parents that are here and to our board members, and we'll see you at the end of the winter season.
Thank you, Mr. Miscavige, and congratulations again to all of our athletes. I always enjoy seeing you on the agenda because then it gives us an opportunity to celebrate, our students' successes. So thank you again. Moving on, next on the agenda, Mr. Rizzo and I will take the podium.
Well, good evening. Our first presentation is a board appreciation. A thank you. We have four. We have, sadly, Wendy Earl, her term would be up, Dave Schaefer, Jen Motzer, and Colleen Zasowski. Serving on a board of directors is a very important responsibility and often quite thankless. Undoubtedly so in these last 4 years. Simply put, you will be missed. This board has endured much during what is likely one of the most difficult times in public education. Thank you for your commitment to our students and challenging us to continue to grow. Thank you for standing beside our families to help us navigate the end of the pandemic and life beyond the pandemic. Thank you for the courage to share your thoughts about what is best for our students, even when it may not have been a popular opinion. You've left an indelible mark on our community and our schools, and we certainly wish you all the very best as you begin your next chapter. Personally, I've gotten to know you quite well, and I really appreciated our time getting to know each other, and I'm going to miss our conversations, and sometimes contentious, and sometimes very emotional, but for the most part, we all did everything we could to support our students the best that we can. So I wish you the best. The next part of this, I'm going to introduce Board President Ms. Hermans to provide a few comments of her own.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, you guys know that normally I roll just off the cuff, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to do that tonight for a variety of reasons. So, of course, I echo everything that Mr. Rizzo just said about, your service to the community, but I wanted to take a different approach and maybe just share some personal words to each of you as you exit, these doors tonight. So I'm going to start with Dr. Motzer. Dr. Motzer, while you've been on this board for what I will personally call a short 18 months, I don't know if you agree with me, in spite of the way that you got here, which was different from the rest of us, being appointed when there was a need, I can say that your presence on the board and your impact has been very meaningful, and it's been felt. Sitting on both the policy and curriculum committee with you, it's very obvious to me that the community was given a gift when you took this position. You are a champion of public education, and your background as a teacher, a reading specialist, an adjunct professor is felt every time you talk. It's been an asset to the board. I've learned so much listening to you speak, and there have been so many times where I know that I've thought, I'm going to say that maybe some other people have thought this as well, why can't I say things like Jen? You just always have the right words and are very deliberate and very eloquent when you want to share a point of view. So I want to thank you again for stepping up to serve this community when we needed somebody and offering your expertise. Mr. Schaefer. I start by saying I think that it's really easy for the community to write what I believe is a false narrative based on what they observe in these board meetings. It's easy to assume that just because a director is maybe affiliated with one party or has a different point of view, that there's a lack of professional respect for each other. And personally, when I think about you, Mr. Schaefer, I can say that that is not the case. I think it's obvious that we sometimes don't see eye to eye on issues, but I have tremendous respect for you and for the service that you've offered Spring-Ford. You have seen the transformation in Spring-Ford, I think, better than most anyone sitting at this board. You have, you've been a student at Spring-Ford. You are Spring-Ford. You've been on the board since 2007, from 2007 to 2012, and then came back to serve the community in the last 4 years. I believe that you have had and will always have the best interest of this community at heart. And I want to thank you for your leadership throughout the years. Mrs. Zasowski. I think that you have single-handedly had the most challenging responsibility, in terms of leading this board through what is absolutely unprecedented times. Frankly, you were damned if you did and damned if you didn't. And as a school board director, let alone a board president during that time, you had to persevere on, and you had to do what you believe in your heart of hearts is right for the district. You dedicated your time unselfishly and your talents unselfishly And while, again, I don't always agree, I do believe that you did that with grace. I'm glad that I got to personally know you outside the craziness of board Zoom meetings. I respect your dedication to the district. I know that you care very deeply for our students, our staff, our community. And your mentorship, if I am still your mentee, I don't know if that continues, but your mentorship to me, in particular, over the last 2 years has been very valuable in my own personal learning. So while I'm sure that you'll be spending time doing things that you love, right, in terms of being with your family, being with your daughters, I might even mention dog mom, but I'm not sure. No, okay, dog mom, no. I hope that you don't end up being a stranger because I value you for the contributions that you've made to this community. Thank you. So with that said, I'd like to call each of you up for your service award. Mr. Rizzo, I think you're going to be handing them out, although this is a little awkward. Maybe I'll move to the side here. So let's start with Dr. Motzer. You're going to go right, why don't you go in the center?
Let's talk to the boss. Aaron?
Aaron, in the center, right in the center. Mr. Rizzo will hand that to you. We'll have and then if we'd like her family to come up and get a picture with her as well, we'll do that. Yeah, but probably with it. Thank you. And don't go too far away, Dr. Motzer, because I would like to get a group picture as well at the end. But next we have Mr. Schaefer. Yes. And then family, please. And Mrs. Zazowski. Could we have Mr. Schaefer and Dr. Motzer join Colleen at the front for a group picture? Thank you. Okay. And so, per usual, we do have a little bit of a tribute video for you. However, I'd first love to give the three of you the opportunity to say any words or to speak.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. So people always ask me why serve on the school board. And my only honest answer is either a concussion from high school athletics or a low IQ or yet another bad decision. But the truth is, I really do love this community. This is my way, or has been my way, of supporting it. I do this to honor my dad and the many, great teachers and administrators that are here and have been here. So it's been an honor. And for those of you that have supported me and voted me in for, 3 terms, I hope I didn't let you down, and I really appreciate it every minute. So thank you.
I really wasn't prepared to speak tonight. So I just wanted to thank the community, thank the board, thank the administration, the teachers. This has been an amazing journey for me to see how a school works from this perspective. So thank you so much for the opportunity. This is an amazing place. So I just feel very fortunate to have served with all of you and to serve the community. So thank you.
Okay, so this has been a long time coming. I definitely want to say thank you to the administration, the faculty, every staff member, parent, student, community member, current and former school board members that I've had the privilege to work alongside with, the solicitors, Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Davis over at Western, and most importantly, my family and my friends that have all supported me. Specifically, my dad was a big part of my election and campaign and getting me here, so I'm really glad he's here tonight. And my husband has just given up a whole lot of time. So I'm back after 8 years, and I know you're happy. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for the honor and the privilege to serve and to be here in Springford in this capacity for the last 8 years. And while there is so much that I could say, and we all know that I am never been one of few words, I'm not going to do that to everybody tonight. I think that it would be best if I just focused on a few of the highlights of the last 8 years. And, first, it's got to be the C word. It's got to be COVID. Oh, wow, COVID, right? I really am so very grateful. It was rough, and it was hard. But I learned so very much about the nature of people and how important it is to always do your best, even when it's not the popular decision, as you referenced. You couldn't make both sides happy. It was one or the other, and it was never both at the same time. But I'll say 2 things out of that. One, Mr. Fitzgerald had called a few of us wartime presidents, and that really stuck with me during that time. I don't know why, but it did. And then I'll say, Mr. Rizzo, you keep parasailing, and you know what that means. Always parasail. When in doubt, that's what to do, right? So you know that. And then my final piece on that, my mic drop on COVID would have to be to recommend the recommendation. And all of you sitting here know exactly what that means. For good, bad, or in between, it's what we went with in the end, and I would stand by that today and for the rest of my life. My next thing I just want to highlight is auction. If you don't think it will sell, I promise you, it doesn't matter what you think, it will sell. Sell, sell, sell to offset all of that new equipment you always want here at Springford to have the best for our students. Please remember to auction and sell. There is a buyer out there, I promise you, and so does Bob Hunter if you ask him. And then the third piece, which I think was hopefully part of my legacy, was about board unity. We sit here, we don't agree all the time, and that's okay, we don't have to agree. We weren't put here to agree. We're 9 members with different opinions, different thoughts, and hopefully we get to the same end result of doing what is best for our students and for our community. That's what it's all about. That's what it's always been all about. So make sure that you get on that float for homecoming, that I'm passing that baton to Karen Weingarten. You get on that float every year. It's 1 hour. There is no excuse. Birthdays, trips, nothing. Get on the float, right? It's important. It's important for the community. If you can sit here for a couple hours twice a month, you can sit on that float and be present for your community. It makes no sense to ride in a car where nobody knows you. Karen is going to make sure that people know that that's the board float. I promise you that. So get on the float. So I hope that my legacy will include some of what I just mentioned here, those things. But what I really hope is that I leave Springford a little bit better maybe than when I came, or with a few more ideas, or a few more things going in the right direction. I hope that I impressed somebody at some point and made a difference, no matter how small, and that's all that mattered to me ever in this. So thank you again, and yeah, good luck. Keep Springford moving forward. And if you ever need anything from the community members, you can count on me, call me, what have you. But thank you for the time that I've been here. It's been most rewarding. Thank you.
With that said, we're going to turn it right over to a tribute video that recognizes some of your time here.
Dr. Jennifer Motzer was appointed to the school board in July 2022. During her time, she brought over 20 years of experience as a public educator to the Policy Committee and the Curriculum and Technology Committee. Thank you, Dr. Motzer, for your service to the Springford community. David Schaefer served on the school board twice, from 2007 to 2012, and again from 2019 to 2023. Mr. Schaefer's lifetime ties to the Springford community and the Springford Area School District drove his passion to serve multiple terms as a school board member. In his most recent term, Mr. Schaefer chaired the extracurricular committee and worked with the district to bring new clubs and sports to the school district. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, for your service to the Springford community. Colleen Zasowski joined the school board in December 2015. During her time, Mrs. Zasowski served on various committees, and over the course of her time chaired both the Community Relations Committee and Policy Committee. She served as board president from 2019 to 2021, and was notably Springford's first female school board president. Thank you, Mrs. Zasowski, for your service to the Springford community. Wendy Earl joined the Springford Board of School Directors in December 2019. Ms. Earl chaired the Policy Committee and was known to bring a practical approach towards conducting school board business. She had a unique ability to stay on point and to lead her committee through updating hundreds of policies. Thank you, Ms. Earl, for your service to the Springford community.
So moving on to presentation C on the agenda. As just noted tonight, not only are we recognizing the service of our outgoing board members, but we're also recognizing a fellow colleague and dear friend who recently passed away, Wendy Earl. And I will get my composure, I promise you. But before we move forward with presenting her Achievement Award for her years of service, I know that there's another board member here that would like to say a few words, and I defer to her first. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen Weingarten.
Thank you.
I know,
this is already. So, you know that saying, she may be tiny, but I'm going to have a, give me a second. She may be tiny, but she is fierce. That was Wendy. Fierce, funny, fearless, and our friend. She was a stickler for punctuation and simplification during all of our policy meetings. She was not afraid to pause, and then she was not afraid to speak her mind. As a friend, she gave me advice on life and told me that she was very lucky to have had such a good time, to have finished her bucket list, to have love and friends to give back, and to give back to her community during such a tumultuous time. And she was very proud of every word she said. I'm so sorry. I consider myself lucky to keep her inspiration, to carry a little piece of that with me. What would Wendy do? That's something we would ask. She'd make it fun, she'd have a laugh, and she would make sure she always did the right thing, but document it with the pithiest language so we could find it very quickly. So cheers to you, Wendy. Thank you for crossing my path and leaving some pretty cool parts behind. So thank you. Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Karen. Okay, so I'll say a few words, but of course a few words will take me a while to get out, so just please bear with me. In the grand scheme of things, I've only known Wendy for a short while. So I know her from the lens. There's only one lens from which I can speak to, which is my time on the board with her. When I think about Wendy, there are three things that I admire most about her. The first is her authenticity. Wendy was genuine, and what I came to love most about her was what I will call her radical candor. You can call it something else, but I'll call it radical candor. You got what you saw with Wendy. She wouldn't say anything about you that she wouldn't say to you, and there's not many people like that. One of my first interactions with Wendy was actually when I was campaigning for school board, and she said to me, "You aren't going to win." And I thought to myself, who is this person? And I kind of laughed it off and didn't realize that, you know, her words were not meant, because at the time I didn't really know Wendy that well, her words were never meant to be malicious, never meant to hurt, but it was honestly, I believe, coming from a place of positive intent to motivate, to encourage. And so it's that radical candor that I came to love, and frankly, I needed at times once I was on this board. Wendy's words, the second thing I love about her, is that whether you agreed with them or not, they always came from a place of care and a place of positive intent. I had the great pleasure of sitting next to Wendy throughout my first year on the board, and she brought a lot of levity to what oftentimes could feel like a very overwhelming situation for a new board director. There were times where I waited on bated breath for Wendy to chime in because she had, you know, if she had something to say, it would be heard. Going back to her care for others, she would from time to time text me in my first year to offer words of encouragement. She would say, "You're doing a great job," or simply offer some positive words about a comment that I made. A lot of people think that they come in qualified for a school board position, but you really don't know what it's like until you sit at the table. So those words of encouragement from Wendy in my first year, which came totally unprompted, meant a lot to me. And that's just who she was. But I think the thing that I admire most about Wendy is something I learned about her in her last couple of months, which is her unwavering commitment to her work and her unwavering commitment to Spring-Ford. As Wendy would occasionally touch base with me and Mr. Rizzo, one thing was clear. She wanted to see her term out. She wanted to lead her committee meetings. She wanted to participate in board meetings, cast her votes, many times putting her service to Spring-Ford above her own personal well-being or how she was feeling at the time. In my last conversation with Wendy, she shared that in spite of receiving the news on her condition, she explained that she had done everything she had wanted to do, but the one thing that she was insistent on was she was going to see her term out and see her service to Spring-Ford out until the end. She talked about how she wanted to participate in the November 27th meeting, and tonight we honor that. In creating tonight's agenda, you will see Mrs. Earle's name under committee updates just like you would if she was here with us today. Because while it might be questionable to some, I feel that honoring what she wanted to finish out her service at Spring-Ford is the best way we can remember her. So Wendy, we will not forget you, and I hope that you know that you left Spring-Ford in a better place than when you came. And so tonight we want to honor you with your Years of Service Award, and we're going to ask her husband, Jim, to come up and accept that award on her behalf. So if it's okay with Mr. Schaefer and Mrs. Zazowski and Dr. Motzer, could we get another group picture to represent our outgoing board members? If you want to come with your Ram statue. So moving on to presentation letter D, we also want to recognize both Mrs. Zazowski and Mr. Jackson for their 8-year honor roll certificate of appreciation from PSBA, the Pennsylvania School Board Association. So I'm just going to say a few words that PSBA has provided to me. So we're here tonight on behalf of the Pennsylvania School Board Association to honor a few school board directors for their years of dedication to Springford. School board service has long been a crucial part of our nation's legacy and its commitment to public education. As the first school board association in the United States, PSBA has a rich history with more than 125 years of service. The school directors are described as ethical, principled, individuals with a deep desire to serve. They believe in the value of our public schools and local control of public education for the benefit of all students. Today, school districts are expected to offer more services along with world-class instruction with limited resources. These expectations provide a tremendous challenge for school directors, unpaid volunteers who dedicate their time to schools and communities they serve. For almost 40 years, PSBA has been acknowledging the contributions of dedicated local school directors with long-term service. The honor roll is the association's way of thanking those individuals who exemplify leadership by giving unselfishly of their time and talents for the betterment of public schools, serving students across the Commonwealth. And with that, I am very pleased to recognize Mr. Jackson and Mrs. Zazowski for their years.
And I still have 2 more to go. Okay.
Mr. Jackson, can you come to the podium to accept your award? As well as Mrs. Zazowski. You did. Okay, and with that said, we will move on. Give me one moment to go back to my seat. Thank you. And with that said, I'm going to invite Dr. Gardy to the podium to discuss the data presentation for the 2022-23 school year.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening. I would like to share with you our 2022-2023 PSSA assessment and Keystone exam results. Just as a reminder, the PSSA is given in English language arts and math in grades 3 through 8, and the science assessment is given in grades 4 through 8, We'll get to the Keystone exams, but those are end-of-year exams in literature, Algebra 1, and biology. Sorry, I'll give everybody a minute to leave there. So on the slides here tonight, you'll see that we have district data summary for English language arts by grade, math by grade, science by grade, and then I'll have additional information on cohort data, which is the students that are in that same grade level across the years, so with 3rd grade through 8th grade. I'll also share with you some information on the Future Ready Index and some action plans. So I won't do the read aloud here, but this is just a reminder of what exactly the PSSA assessments are, as well as the keystones I kind of summarized as I began. And I want us to take a first look at the 3rd grade trends. So as the understanding of what this slide shows, the data shows from 2018 through 2023. The ELA scores are on the left of the lighter blue, and the math scores are on the right. And just taking a look at this information, we can see that obviously we don't have that data point from 2020 as a reminder with the COVID year, but we can take a look at that, and ELA has maintained relative proficiency across before COVID and now after COVID, and grade 3 math remains essentially the same. The next slide shows the grade 4 trends. Again, in 4th grade, they take the ELA exam, the math exam, and the science exam. So on the leftmost columns is the ELA data. And you can see that the trend here kind of has been pretty well established for ELA, some ups and downs across the year, but really relatively stable. For the math, you can see the same type of thing, except for that year in the middle there was 2021 after COVID. And then the science data, again, remains relatively strong compared to the other areas. This slide shows a lot of that same information, just broken down in a different way. Again, over the years of 2021, 2022, 2023, these are the subject areas, grade levels, and the advanced and proficient for each of those. The additional data point I was able to add this year from Linkit was the Montgomery County % of proficient and advanced. I know that's something that we had talked about in the past where that ranking may fall. So you can see here, for example, the 3rd grade ELA 2023 scores for Spring Forward, 76% advanced and proficient. Montgomery County, that was 65%. The state average is 54%. So the far right column is the difference between Spring Forward and the state average. So I'll give you a minute to take a look at that. The next slide shows the breakdown from below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. As a reminder, we really are looking for that score of proficient or advanced for all students. So we do have some areas of students that we really want to make sure that we're moving towards that proficiency. The next slide shows the grade 5 trends. Again, set up the same way with ELA on the left, math on the right. The ELA scores have essentially remained unchanged over the course of the period of time that is represented here. One of the things that we are looking at is looking at that math score. We are looking for improvements in math. We have talked about this in the past, and we're doing a lot of work, and I'll explain some of the work that we're doing at the end of the presentation. But I do want you to note that basically those math scores were very low in 2021, and we've rebounded to the pre-COVID time period with the 2023 scores. Grade 6 is the next slide, similar setup. We have the math, ELA on the left, math on the right. Again, very similar to the 6th grade trends. ELA remains relatively stable. The math scores did dip down in 2021, and they've rebounded to where we were before COVID. This is the same breakdown as that previous slide for 3rd and 4th grade, just again shown a little bit differently. This has the information from 21, 22, 23, again with the Montgomery County average of proficient and advanced, the state average, and that far, the green block, are all the differences from the state averages. This slide shows the breakdown again of the basic, below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced scores. And the next section is the same situation for 7th grade. In 7th grade, they take the ELA and math just like in 6th grade and 5th grade. Looking at this again from 2018 to 2023, the ELA scores again remain relatively high and stable across the time period, and the math again has rebounded from the low in 2021. This slide again breaks down the information from 2021, 2022, 2023, and again against the state and the county. The next slide is the grade 8 trends. So again, this is in 8th grade, they take ELA, math, and science. And one of the areas that we have talked about in the past, and again, this year, we can see that our math scores in 8th grade are an area that we want additional improvement. The ELA scores have remained relatively stable with some ups and downs across the year, and the science is much stronger even than it was even before COVID. It has been strengthened over the time. This is the same slide as previous with the 8th grade scores in it. So looking at it again across those 3 years with the average from Montgomery County, the state average, and then the state comparison to Spring-Ford. And just take a look at where we are right now for math, because when I get to the future slides, looking at our proficient and advanced is 44% for Spring-Ford. Montgomery County is 38, and the state average is 26, but there's still areas that we want to work on. This is a breakdown here, again, for 7th and 8th grade for the proficiency levels. Sorry about that. The next slide actually gets into the Keystone exam, so that's what I skipped over it. It went a little too fast for me, so I apologize for that. Taking a look here, these are the Keystone exam results. For literature, again, this year it was 70.7%. Montgomery County was at 58%. The state average was 65.3%. And looking at the Algebra 1, I will add an additional data point here. Looking at the 2023, our Spring-Ford was 66.8. That was the average between the high school scores and the middle school scores. For our middle school, our proficiency in advance was 94.4%, and the high school was at 52.7%. So I just wanted to show you again, by comparison to the county, since we had that as a breakdown for us now as well. And then looking at the biology scores, again, much stronger than the state and county. This is the information for that breakdown for the spring administration, as well for literature, Algebra 1, and biology. I do want to highlight that we have many students achieving the advanced level in the biology exam, and if you've taken biology, you know that it is not an easy task to do. And the next section is the cohort data. So this is when we're looking at specific classes. So it'll be the 2027 class, which is the current 9th grade, through the 2031, which is the current 5th graders. So I look at this a little bit differently than when we look at the proficiency on the previous slides, because these are the same students that we've had since the beginning. So if they're listed up here, that means we've had them from 3rd grade, in this case, through 8th grade data. So it's the same students, we've had them throughout their career here. So looking at their 3rd grade data through their 8th grade data, again, the ELA remains relatively stable, and the math is, this is our current class of 2029, our current 7th graders. Very similar story, they continue to strengthen both in ELA and in math. This is our current 6th grade. Very similar story. There's a little bit of a dip there in the math, but overall it's a relatively stable group. This is our class of 2031. I have a typo there, so I apologize for that. Taking a look at that, this is the information again for our current 5th graders, and they are pretty similar scores across both of those bands for ELA and math. So the last part here, just looking at what we can do as a community and as a school district, there are areas that even someone mentioned earlier, the Future Ready Index, that is a public-facing site. That information will have state assessment measures, on-track measures, college and career readiness, and the information listed under those bullet points are the information that you can find on those sites in order to look at student achievement relative to whether it's Spring-Ford or other surrounding districts. That information will include proficiency for advanced for PSSA, Keystone, for Math, Science, ELA, as well as areas of demonstrating growth. Looking at the English language growth and attainment scores, regular attendance, some early indicators of success which begin in 3rd grade for ELA, and the early indicators of success in grade 7 looking at math. And there's some additional information looking at college and career benchmarking, graduation cohorts, industry-based competencies, as well as post-secondary transition. I want to just remind the community and our board, just looking at, this is one data snapshot, one couple days in time. What we really focus in is our students, and looking at this pillar, assessment is one component of that pillar. We also look at our curriculum, our instruction, our management, making sure that we're really focused on that student-focused learning. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that we're really proud of, looking at our data with our teachers, with our administrators. The comprehensive plan is well underway. We're working towards MTSS teams in place and being able to support our students with even more precise needs. And then the learning loss plan continues to address student needs, making sure that we're looking through tutoring, summer programming, additional social, emotional, and mental health resources. And our students were high achieving by comparison to other schools across the county and across the state. And our cohort data shows that we're really maintaining or growing in our English and language arts programs. I just wanted to remind you of some of the things that we had prioritized with our comprehensive plan. I'm just going to flip over because I have a few more notes here. So just taking a look, I had mentioned what we were focusing and working on. Under goal math, the goal number one for math, all buildings will meet or exceed the 2030 PSSA proficiency targets for math. And what we're doing right now in our grades 5 through 8 band and Algebra 1, these documents are being finalized, as well as looking at product reviews so we can do additional resources for our teachers. This includes professional development and new resources for our students. And then the K-4 curriculum review will occur next school year. And then we're also looking at Math Goal 3. We talked a little bit before about this, but we have math intervention resources being utilized in grades 5 through 7 for targeted math intervention. So these are all things that we've been either putting in place or are in place right now in order to support our math achievement. The other piece under intervention, we have teams that have been established and they're working on finalizing plans for additional systems of support. And then the intervention goal number 2, all buildings have data teams that have been established. We had summer team training. There were also some fall sessions. Dr. Reinheimer actually led some this afternoon, and additional sessions are scheduled later this late fall, early winter, and then into the winter with our elementary teams. And then under special education, we've continued with teacher training, updated resources, partnerships among IEP teams to continue to focus on the least restrictive environment. Some other things that you'll see on the agenda later as we get into the curriculum and programming are related to the structured literacy grant. We have definitely new resources and some additional training that our teachers will be able to have that'll also strengthen and support special education as well as general education in the ELA area. I said that. Going backwards, sorry about that. I have one last piece here. This is for any community member, any teacher, any administrator. We have information linked here that you'll be able to access the Keystone exam and PSSA information, that Future Ready glossary, as well as where to find that Future Ready PA index. And there's a link there that takes you to family and teacher resources as well. I would like to take any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you, Mrs. Gardy. I'll defer it over to Dr. Wright.
Thank you. And thank you very much to you for presenting this information to us and to your team, your admin team, the teachers, that take the time to prepare our students for the PSSAs and the Keystones, and then also the families that really make a commitment to having their students show up for these tests prepared to do the best that they can on them too. A couple of things, the resources that you just offered, how will people be able to access those?
Usually Ms. Crew does post this on our website, so that will be able to be linked.
Perfect, thank you. I know that some people will look at this data and will break it apart and misinterpret some of it. And you had mentioned that this is just one data point when we're looking at assessment, that it's just a couple of days throughout the entire year. But some will look at it and say that, half our students are failing, for example, half our 8th grade students are failing math. Can you please explain how that is not what this is measuring? Thank you.
I can go back to that slide too if that helps, but what that information actually does show, it does show a representation of where students were against those 8th grade standards in that given point in time. So taking a look at, sorry, I probably should have gone back before. So taking a look, I think you're referring to where that 44%, is that what you're referring to? That is a concern for us because we do believe our students are able to produce higher level scores on that. One of the things that we continue to look at though is looking at the growth of individual students. So one of the metrics is looking at, it's called PVAS, so we're able to look at what a student was able to do in say 7th grade and making sure that they're continuing to grow as an individual. And then looking for supports, whether it's enrichment or remediation to support those students. So this isn't a grade per se, like if you're thinking of a failing grade, this is a percent of students that were considered proficient or advanced on this particular exam for those particular standards.
Thank you very much for explaining that. And always knowing that the work is never finished. I liked that you talked about some of the interventions and some of the things that we are doing as a district in order to continue to grow. It is, no child left behind, that idea. We'd like to see everybody to be proficient or advance. And I know that the staff is always working to improve that. And you talked about the new math curriculum with that. Just one other thing, the MTSS, would you explain what that is and for people who might not know that?
Sorry. Yes, so currently or in the past years, we have been working under RTII model, a response to intervention and instruction. Really moving to an MTSS model, it stands for multi-tiered systems of support, and that is really just looking at the whole child, making sure that we're looking at reading, looking at math, looking at social emotional supports, looking at the mental health component, behavioral supports, making sure that the student gets all of the things that they need in order to be successful, making sure that we're supporting families in ways that they may need that we haven't maybe have overlooked in the past, making sure that we're supporting, again, that whole child like you mentioned.
Thank you very much. And like I said, I know that we're always working to improve, but it was so nice to see the growth that we have made since last year. So thank you to your team.
I would just like to add to that too. It's really nice to see that before we step out that things are starting to, regroup and get back to where Springford is a leader. And, I think, as we know, everybody took the hit, and we saw the graphs and the charts that pointed that out, but it's still nice to see those numbers rebounding, and it's because of all the work that you guys do every day to bring that back. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Mrs. Gardy? Thank you, Mrs. Gardy. Moving on, we will welcome our CFO, Mr. Fink, to the podium to go through the proposed preliminary budget presentation.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. I hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving. We're going to talk about preliminary budget. I guess I hit the button. There's our agenda. There we go. There it is. So we're going to talk about preliminary budget. As a reminder, everybody on the board has been through this exercise before. Act 1 specifies what we have to do and when we have to do it by, as a runway up to getting the final budget done, which we shoot for in the late part of May. So in order to make that timeline, we're starting this process in November, as we have the past, well, basically since I've been with the district. Professionally, I will tell you that this is called a preliminary budget, but professionally, I would say this is a very preliminary budget. And the reasons I will say that is because when you look at where we are, and it's on a later slide, but when you look at where we are, we're only a couple months into operation to see if this budget is really taking traction yet. So, but the first thing I want to do is go through the timeline so I can, so we can look at where we're going. Tonight, of course, we're going to talk about the proposed preliminary budget. The law says that we have to have it available for public inspection 20 days before it's adopted, so that will have to be done by January 1st, so my team will be working diligently to get that done. That'll be on the form, the PDE form 2028. We'll post it to the website, and of course have hard copy in the district office if anybody chooses to come look at it. We give public notice on the 12th, and we'll look to adopt that proposed preliminary budget on the 22nd at that board meeting. We will file for our referendum exceptions in the beginning of February. And likely that number typically is around 1.5 to 2 million. Not that we've used them since I've been here at least, but funds available should we need it. Following that, we will sharpen our pencils and look at the chunks, as Mrs. Zazowski likes to say, and we will put heads down, and we'll getting the budget books out to the different departments and the buildings. I couldn't pass that up, but getting the budget books out to the buildings, going through the personnel plan, which will start, I believe, at some point in January, and look at where we're going so that we'll have a proposed final budget presentation and the adoption of that at the April board meeting. That is not the final, that is the proposed final. We still have 30 days to work on that budget before its final adoption, which would be targeted for May the 27th. Keeping in mind that we have all the way until June 30th to get it adopted. I don't advise waiting that long, but we can, by law at least. Some challenges in preparation of this very preliminary budget are, as I said before, the timing. We're 4 months into the current year, fiscal year, 2 months into operations. So that means there's not a ton of data to really look at to see if the budget we have for this year is really taking traction. We do have some evidence that it is, but there's still a lot of time to go through there. This is also a labor negotiation year with our teachers association. So those discussions obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, those discussions may or may not have an impact on this preliminary budget. The state budget, there's always a bunch of unknowns there. That doesn't come out, the first draft doesn't usually come out until the February timeframe. And it's very difficult to ascertain what the subsidies might look like. We had a prior administration where the subsidies, the basic ed subsidy and the special ed didn't really move all that much until that last year. And then the current administration, it was a big boom. Whether it's still going to be a big boom going forward, it's hard to say. And then, of course, it's an election year, so I don't know if the discussions around property tax reform are going to start coming back up again. So who knows? But let's look at some of the major items within this preliminary budget. Of course, always wages and benefits, personnel costs are the biggest piece of any service industry organization. They account for, in this case, about 70% pretty consistently year over year. And I'm just talking about basic organic growth here. So just as our staff moves through the salary schedule, that will add approximately $1.7 million to this budget as it stands right now. For admin and support wages, add another $500,000 or so, a little bit more than that. And then a provision in this preliminary budget, which is basically formulaic based on student population trends and trends in special education needs and those types of things, looking at about $800,000 in potential new positions. Again, those are done formulaically in the budget model. Those, of course, result in changes to the taxes and benefits line. So for retirement, for example, this current year, retirement costs of the district are 34% of payroll. It's projected to be 34.73, so add another quarter point to that. Those final numbers aren't due out until like mid-December, so I'll have a better gauge when that happens. But just looking at the projection of that increase would be about $1.85 million. Medical and dental and such, looking at an increase there of about $900,000. That's right in line with Rischini in the first look we just did, Mrs. Lisa and I did with them about 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, payroll taxes, as the wages go up, so do the taxes related to it, about $456. Now, if I look at some non-personnel related things, again, these are items that will need to be scrubbed through as we move forward after the new year. Special education services, those are outside services and placements and those types of things, potentially about $1 million there. Dr. Giambattista and I will be talking in detail about that in the coming months. Transportation, according to our contract, about $785,000. Charter schools increases are always a concern. With the increase in registrations there, and of course the increases in per pupil costs each year. Substitutes, Western Center. Curriculum looks like a larger number because we're expecting to have some curriculum buys. Mrs. Gardy and I will be talking about that in detail over the coming months. But I put an asterisk there because at the bottom you can see a good portion of that is offset by funding through the tech reserve that we, of course, set up a few years ago as part of the longer-term plan, which will offset some of those costs. Facilities, about $160,000 there. Dan and I, of course, and Sean will be going through those numbers in detail soon. And then, of course, we talked about this in finance, I think towards the end of last year, a potential increase in the budgetary reserve, which has been flat at a $300,000 number since long before I came here, probably should be more tied as a percentage of the overall budget, and that's what that contemplates. So if I put all that together, what it looks like is the numbers are, of course, fun to watch, but I look at that bottom right-hand number, and you can see an increase year over year in budget to budget of about 6.72%. Again, as I said earlier, very preliminary. But let's take a quick, I want to remember that 6.72% because I'm going to compare that to the revenue side shortly. So looking at that revenue side of the ledger, local income is about 80% of the overall revenue bucket for Spring-Ford. So a lot of local dollars go into our stuff. So if I look at, and again, this is just organic growth. Organic growth is saying that about 1.97%, we should see an upward trend in our real estate taxes, which equates to about $2.5 million. It's important to note that that's an increase in assessments, which is typically, well, unless someone's improving their home, adding a pool or that type of stuff, your assessment stays the same, right? This is adding properties to the assessment base, so or home improvements, additions, or those types of things. So that's what and that's without raising any taxes or tax rates. Earned income tax has been very strong for the past number of years. Same with transfer tax, real estate transfer taxes. So we're looking at increasing those estimates going forward. Small increase in delinquent taxes as our our inventories of delinquent taxes are lower than they have been. As there's only a small increase there, that is actually a good thing because that means that our residents are paying their taxes on time, which is a great thing. On the state side, we leveled up on the basic education and the special education subsidy based on this current year's allocation. Which was about $700,000 more than we thought we were going to get, by the time we approved our budget last year. So we go up to that level. We'll know more about that in February, and then we'll have to wait and see what sticks once we start hearing what the discussions are in the chambers. Transportation subsidy, I think it's important to take that down. We're seeing that as a lower percentage of overall transportation costs as a downward trend. PSERS and FICA subsidies, almost $1 million greater. That's because we're increasing, number one, the percentage, but also the base of the wages. So you pay more, you get a little bit more of the subsidy. PlanCon, we're looking probably at a reduction, we are looking at a reduction of that, and that's simply because some of our debt is rolling off. So we won't be getting those subsidies. Federal, everyone knows, I would hope at least that come the end of this year, give or take, it's really September of '24, ESSER's done. So we're looking at a drop in those numbers as well. So now when I look at those revenue numbers, budget to budget side by side, again, the numbers are interesting, but what I see is, again, in that bottom right-hand corner, I see 2.35% compared to the 6.72% I saw on organic growth on the expense side of the budget, and you can see where that disparity is. So expenses are growing faster than organic revenues. When I look at what kind of gap we have, this is not uncommon for this time of year. So we're looking at a gap of about, revenues and other funding sources over expenses, a shortage of about a little under $8.5 million, which if we were to look at a tax impact number there is about 6.5%. If I would look up to make up that gap to get us down to the index, I'm sorry, 6.5% total, not to get down to the index. It's not uncommon. I think the past number of years we've been in that ballpark this time going forward. So just some final thoughts. Just a reminder that the index for this coming year is 5.3%. It's up from 4.1%. That's due to economic conditions, obviously. The referendum exceptions that will likely be available to us, as I said earlier, is about $1.5 million to $2 million, should we want to tap that. The next steps, of course, are the deep dives. I don't have to read them. You guys can read them there. So, but really what we're looking to do next from my side is to get budget books out to the departments and to the buildings so they could start going through what they're looking at their spends might look like, getting the personnel plan together that, of course, as I said before, will likely start right after the new year. And of course, getting this very preliminary budget approved in January. Any questions? Comments?
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Fink. This is the same dance we do every year. There's nothing new here. The approach has been consistent since I've been on the board. And we will continue to focus on, excuse me, working the numbers. We're doing the deep dives. Our monthly meetings, we go through this. So if you want to be involved, come to the finance meetings. Everything is discussed there in detail. For the current board members, and I know we have 4 or 5 coming on, this is the time to start submitting your suggestions, and not waiting until we're at the 11th hour and we're all scrambling trying to do simple math. So this is November. This gives us 8 months. It gives all of us 8 months to participate in this process. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Dr. Wright?
Thank you very much. And echoing what Mr. Jackson said, it's a time right now to start listening, gathering information, things like that. And having been here, done this for a while, I do recognize also that number's high. We're going to work to bring that down. And looking at information gathering, I just had a question for you, which is kind of separate from this. The annual finance report, the audit report, I think this is about the time of year that we normally would get that, and that, I think, is valuable information for us to look at going forward. Can you share any timeline?
Yeah, I could tell you that that currently is in quality assurance at our auditor's office. I don't expect many changes on that. I do know it's a clean audit, as it always is, at least since I've been here. But I'll have more information on it when the final report comes out. It should be within the next month and a half or so.
Great. So you'll be sharing that with the board, with the community, so that they're
I'd likely
aware of
be
it.
sharing that at committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Fink? Okay, thank you. Moving on to board and committee reports, we will start with Mr. Call and Ms. Stein for our student rep report.
Next slide. Yeah, so November was a pretty packed month, and at the end of October too. We started off with some big pack championship wins, as we mentioned earlier today. Boys golf and boys golf and girls tennis. Jumped the gun a little bit there. Boys golf and girls tennis both winning the pack championship, and a special shout out to Evelyn Mejia and Mia Matricino for coming first in the PIAA States tournament for girls tennis. That's the first time in school history that two girls that we placed first in that tournament. Additionally, in some less exciting news, but still exciting, first quarter ended and the second quarter began. Report cards were released for all grades, I believe, over the past couple weeks. So be sure to check that out if you're in high school and really any grade to monitor your progress. And this is the beginning of a new quarter, so remember to stay ahead of the curve if you fell behind a little bit last quarter. As for college decisions, early action and early decision application the deadline was November 1st, and many students are receiving acceptances as we speak. And if you were like me, you had a huge sigh of relief on November 2nd. And we also had Election Day on November 7th, and we'll be seeing some new faces around here and missing Mr. Schaefer, Mrs. Zowski, and Dr. Moser. In addition, we've had some big international exposure. The Limerick to Limerick exchange program kicked off this year. So for 2 weeks, 14 Irish students came to our neck of the woods. They spent time in with our school with 14 Springford students, and they also traveled around the area, going to Philadelphia, New York City, and Washington, D.C. And in this upcoming March, they actually left today. And in this upcoming March, 14 of our own, the ones who hosted, will be going to Limerick, Ireland, and spending 2 weeks there. That's around the spring break time. And as for another side of things, Springford to Stuttgart also kicked off as well. On November 18th, 14 Springford students traveled to Germany and will be spending time till December 2nd there. Currently, last week they spent the week in Stuttgart, and they'll be traveling throughout other European areas as we speak right now. And finally, last week was fall break, and we had some parent-teacher conferences as well.
So now into future events, and before I get started, I just want to recognize the outgoing board members. I know I've only been on this board for a few months, but it's really been a pleasure to work with all three of you, and I just wish you all good luck with your future endeavors. And then I would also like to recognize Ms. Earl. I know that, again, I've only been on this board for a few months, but she truly had an impact on everyone, I believe, and I know that she will truly leave a lasting mark on the Springport community. Now on to future events. Winter sports have started. Tryouts for our winter sports were the Friday before Thanksgiving break. We have the SAT, not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday on December 9th that will be administered here at Springford. Winter concerts will start the week of December 11th for multiple grades throughout the district. Winter break will begin on December 25th, Christmas to January 2nd. That's new this year. Usually it's just until January 1st, and then we come back to school January 2nd. But on January 2nd, the district will be closed. And then again, the district will be closed on January 15th for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And finally, there will be a school board organizational meeting next Monday on December 4th to introduce our new school board members and to really put together our new board as a whole. And then just final reminders, we always want to continue to read the weekly update for district-wide news that goes for parents and students throughout the district. And then we also want our students to keep up with their current assignments. So thank you.
I just wanted to add real quick, I would like to echo what Stella said about Mrs. Earl. She'll be truly missed, and her impact will not be forgotten anytime.
Thank you very much, both of you. I have to say, the Limerick to Limerick exchange, you talked about them going to New York and DC. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw something online, they went to the Shady Maple Smorgasbord, talking about our neck of the woods. Is that accurate? Because that's an event all on its own. I mean, that is...
Yeah, and I have to say, last year, I was actually at the Shady Maple, and they were there on the same day, coincidentally, and it was kind of funny to see them, but it was just...
That's good. All right. Questions or comments for our student reps? Thank you very much. Moving on, Mr. Schaefer, extracurricular.
Thank you very much. So, met on November the 15th, and I love following our student rep reports because they take a lot of the updates that are, they're stealing my thunder, and that's the way it should be. However, I would like to comment on a few things that were reported. The fall play, Radium Girls, was the most attended fall play. And so that's a big shout out and thank you to all of those who participated in that. The high school marching band, we're used to seeing a lot of accomplishments there, but nonetheless, third place finish at the Cavalcade of Bands, also had an 8th place finish at the Bands of America Championships, and so congratulations to Andrew Walls and his team for continuing to lead that. There were 3 new clubs that were added. This is, again, a report on some of the additional extracurricular, non-sports related. My favorite is the Future Teachers of Springford Club, and thrilled to see that. I was wondering if we could sign them up for teaching right away. Something to think about. Mr. Jones, many of you know, created a Padlet, and Mr. Jackson learned all about Padlets because he was in attendance, and I'm thankful for that. But it's essentially a way for, he takes pictures of posters and announcements that are on campus so that our cyber students and really anybody from an electronic perspective can see what used to be a, just something that you would see a poster in the hallway. So I thought that was a really great, free and innovative addition to help get the word out about some of our programs. So, and then there was one action item. There was a number of parents, and it was great to see some of the students come up showing their support for the girls flag football. There were parents that were in attendance again, and so I'm excited to see that on the agenda this evening and appreciate in advance the board's support of that. And the next meeting will be determined by the new board, and I respectfully submit my last report for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Any questions or comments? Okay, next would be policy, and we actually did not meet this November. And so we will be moving on to Dr. Wright. Well, actually, is Dr. Motzer, are you giving the update since you were leading? Okay.
The Curriculum and Technology Committee met on November 13th. We had an extensive agenda, and a lot of it is in our current agenda tonight for approval, so I'm just going to highlight some of the other items. Mr. Catalano gave updates on the Skyward New Student Enrollment feature. We also had an update on Summer RAMS 2023. We looked at some of the data, which was very positive. And we also had a literacy night update. So thank you to the teachers and staff and families who participated in that on November 6th. As far as summer programs in 2024, I'm just going to run through the dates that we have so far. Summer RAMS will be July 8th through August 1st. Summer pre-kindergarten, same dates. And then band camp will be July 8th through July 11th for grades, students finishing grades 4 through 6. And more specifics about times and eligibility will be coming out in the future. Dr. Collier talked about dual enrollment and some new opportunities that the district may have. And then as far as approvals are concerned, we're going to be seeing the new behavioral science course on the agenda, and then information about the structured literacy grant. Two different things will be happening, I guess, with that money. The first will be training for teachers, Wilson Reading, certification, introductory course, AIM Pathways, and a reading specialist certification program, which is very exciting. And then the other part of the grant will be used for intervention materials, which you'll see on the agenda. looking to see if there's anything else. Typing Pals on the agenda tonight. We had an update about the structured literacy course that is meeting the Act 55 requirements for the current teaching staff. And we also heard about the Amplify Language Studio for our English language development group. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Dr. Motzer?
I did have a question. Just this structured literacy grant, if you look on this agenda, it covers, I guess, all the way from C to L, right, under programming and curriculum. And I know that Dr. Motzer did just reference that there were a number of items on here related to that. So with all of this being spent through this grant, is this going to continue? Is this structured? Are you planning to have this continue?
I'm going to
year
actually
after
ask
year?
Katie Gardy to talk about that. She's done extensive work with the grant, so she can talk to it in more depth.
Okay.
This grant actually came out of the Senate District 44 as part of the ESSER funds, so we became eligible for that funding based on an allocation. So this is a one-time grant.
Right, so that was my concern. If this is a one-time grant and we're starting a lot of programming, what's the intention then to how that's going to be covered going forward? Is there a plan?
So the training will actually just give those teachers Wilson training, so they'll be able to provide that service. The reading specialist certification, that just becomes general knowledge. Like Dr. Motzer and I are both reading specialists. We can, teach children that way, understanding, learning, just a depth of knowledge. And the other items are some of those interventions that I had mentioned when I gave the presentation, that those will be used either by those teachers or other reading specialists or instructional support teachers already, as well as some of our special education teachers. So we don't need to purchase those materials again unless it's like they got damaged or something like that, but they're not an ongoing annual renewal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just had a quick question because you mentioned Summer Rams. Do we anticipate this being the last year that it is covered through the ESSER funding?
So it's definitely the last year it'll be covered through ESSER. ESSER needs to be completed by September 2024, so we are covered for this upcoming summer. But beyond that, that needs to be something that we need to have a discussion about, whether or not we want to include it in the regular budget. It is about $100,000 to run, so that would be something we were planning to bring to committee in January to start those discussions, but it's definitely something to be thinking about, whether or not we wanted to allocate district funds for that moving forward.
Weren't you going to do a little bit more of a thorough review or survey of the different groups this time?
So Katie did present that in curriculum committee. She presented some data, just some feedback from the Summer Rams. We think it's been an effective program, but the intent of Summer Rams was a learning loss program. And its intent of the money was to be able to help recover some of those gaps. We did not have it before COVID. So I think that that's something that, while we are seeing success and we are seeing that it has been an effective program, you also see some of our data has rebounded, which would, beg us to really kind of look at that a little bit further. So I'm a little bit torn right now because it has been a great program. It's been a successful program, but it's also done its job, which is help keep students on track over the summer. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on, Mr. Jackson, Finance.
Good evening. Finance Committee met on November 14th. Meeting was called to order. There were no questions asked on the agenda. This is somewhat bittersweet for me. I won't cry, but it is bittersweet. This is my last report for this year on finance, and it'll be pretty hard to follow up to Mr. Fink, but I'll try very hard. So, new business, and this is for executive reports through October 31. Liquidity is $151 million cash on hand. Revenues, other local sources up due to interest revenue. Investment rates are locked November 10th, 23 for the next 9 months. BMT and AMLR. Expenditures are coming in as expected. Assessments. October assessments came in at $23 million. Appeals with companies are coming lower than expected, which is good. Transfer tax, 70% of the annual budget goal achieved, on pace for $3 million. Earned income taxes, 6% over year growth and pacing for 13.5 to $14 million for the year. Self-funded health insurance currently higher than budgeted. Rashini forecasts 12% increase year to year with the current 24-25 budget model. Food service, over 100,000 meals served year to date with strong demand, which is great. Mr. Fink talked about the budget timeline. Items for discussion at this meeting will be the busing software contract, the Spring City American Legion lease extension, and memorializing the Royersford Ford Free Public Library lease, and 2 settlement appeals. And as I mentioned at the finance meeting, I mentioned tonight, the budget process, the timelines, urging members not to wait to the end of the process to look at items. And that concludes my final finance meeting for the year.
For the year. Yes, Mrs. Zowski.
So I have a question. Let me find it for a minute. Oh, that's right. In finance previously, we had discussed about the implementation of some transportation routing software that I see is on the agenda this month. Now, had been taken off previously because there were some further developments on that.
It was taken off to reevaluate the pricing that we had gotten from one vendor, and so we went back and renegotiated that cost.
And so this is improved pricing then? Okay, thanks.
And one last thing, I just cannot let it go by. Mrs. Rosowski, this is your last night, so I have to say with love and affection, it is the 3 Ps, property, programs, personnel, and not chunks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we will move on to property, and maybe we can even honor Mrs. Zowski by talking about auctioning something. I don't know.
All right. This is bittersweet as this is my last property meeting for the year. Ongoing business, there was discussion regarding the Giza projects and the overall schedule. We're currently 95% complete. There were also some additional items that were discussed. Lighting at the 8th grade center is 50% complete, and it is being completed tonight based on my conversation with Mr. Sean Ryan prior to the meeting. We also discussed intermediate HVAC project. We updated the committee on the status of the intermediate heat pumps replacement, currently at 95% complete. There was also an update by Chief Boyer. All monthly drills, evacuation drills, ALICE drills were completed per safety school requirements. Grants, which is Chief Boyer is the chief of grants. The second part of the PCCD grant 38439 is the purchase of 80 digital radios and 154 spare batteries. The radios and batteries are part of the overall security communication plan for the district. They've been ordered, and we do not have a ETA as of yet. There was training, TASER recertification training that occurred on November 20th at the Upper Providence Police Department. There was also discussion regarding capital reserve projects, which we will follow up in January in addition. And those are listed as the 9th grade fire alarm system, Limerick generator replacement, high school and 8th grade center asphalt repair, 9th grade and Brook carpet replacement, Brook playground equipment, and the high school fire pump replacement. There will be the cameras for phase 3 upgrade and the purchase of 32 licensed and 32 extended warranties through CoStar that will be on the agenda for approval. And in all seriousness, Ms. Zerkowski, I don't know who will do property next year, but I will definitely suggest that they make auction a part of policy. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Jackson? Okay, moving on. Mrs. Zazowski, would you like to acknowledge that we had a personnel meeting?
We did. We had a meeting on November 10th.
8th.
No, 10th was personnel. 8th was executive session.
My apologies.
Right?
You're
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. MCIU, Dr. Wright.
Thank you very much. I did attend the MCIU meeting on November 13th. The next one will be January 24th. There were information covered, but I really wanted to kind of focus today on, I was able to attend the PSBA Delegate Assembly for 2023 representing the MCIU. We also had 2 board members here that attended it virtually for our school board, but just touching on things that occurred. It was in Mechanicsburg on November 4th. The purpose of it was voting on proposed amendments for the 2024 PSBA legislative platform. These are the recommendations that PSBA makes to our Pennsylvania legislators in Harrisburg. So this was just on amendments for that. Those that were proposed and adopted were to allow school boards the option to specify mechanisms for fulfilling public notice requirements which are not limited to newspapers of general circulation. So in other words, PSBA is asking the legislator to consider changing it so that we do not have to use specifically newspapers, that school boards could make announcements and get information out to the community using other variety of information sources. Also regarding cyber charter schools, that a set tuition should be established for regular ed and a tiered tuition for special ed students. This is a way of kind of controlling the amount of money that districts have to spend to, in tuition to cyber charter schools. They're also enacting legislation that would allow school districts to withhold payment to charter schools for each student in the absence of validated current residency within the district. So currently, if a cyber charter school or charter school says that they have one of our districts there, we cannot prove residency even within Pennsylvania, let alone our district. The charter schools are not obligated to work with us to determine if that student truly is a resident of our district. So school districts' kind of hands are tied, and we must pay for that student even though we question whether they are our resident. They also, further regarding charter school reform, the state should not require school districts to make payments to a charter school for early childhood and kindergarten programs. Currently, if a district has an early childhood program, they must pay of tuition for that. And kindergarten is not a requirement, or early childhood at this point the districts offer. And so that they're asking legislators in Harrisburg to make it so that districts are not required to pay that tuition for students at the charter schools for that. So those are the recommendations that were amendments that were made for our legislature. So that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Any questions or comments? Okay. We'll go to Mrs. Zazowski for the Western Montgomery Career and Technology Center.
Yes, so the Western Center, the JOC, met on November 6th. Prior to that meeting, a few of us did attend a meeting with Mr. Livingood, the director over there, along with the reviewers, because we had a 339 review or audit, what have you there. And there were a number of commendations, a few recommendations, and very few corrective actions that came out of that 339 review. Most importantly, the purpose was really to elevate the school, to bring the school up, to notice the things that are really positive. They said over and over again that they noticed the cleanliness and organization of the school. and that the students were always engaged. So that was critical to their findings about the district, not the district, about the tech school. So the reviewers that were there also commented that they would send their own kids there, they would work there themselves. They really enjoyed the time that they had there, and they do like to take one thing away with them when they go back to their own places of employment. And so they each had planned to take something different, but they were able to easily find things because they felt that our school was very well run, and it's doing a real service to the students that are there. Some other things going on, there have been some donations there in terms of some lighting and some Milwaukee equipment, some gloves, glasses, things like that. And there's also an electric company in the area, local company, that is going to help us with the installation of lighting in order to obtain this PICO rebate. So they'll be working with the facilities manager over there to get that happening. 21 students went to the Kalahari Resort recently for the Skills USA Leadership Conference. 21 out of our students over there, so that's a good number. December 6th is the open house. A few other things, Mr. Rizzo is now over there as the superintendent of record, so welcome, Mr. Rizzo, to Western Center. Mr. Craig Robinson is the new principal over there. He joined, I think it was in and around October 17th, and he's been getting to know the students, the faculty, the different programming that's over there. Really jumped all in, so that's really good that that's happening too. They're very much in process over there, so hopefully they'll continue to grow. Really want to get the word out that those programs are there and available for our students. In Spring-Ford, we have slipped a little bit, okay? Upper Perk, their numbers are rising above ours for the second year in a row. So let's do something here and let's get the word out about the programs over there. Let's get our students and encourage our students to go to the open house on December 6th. Let's start with that. What else do I want to add here? Oh, the applications are open already, and I did want to comment on the co-op. 22 students are already out, and it's the end of the first quarter. They're hoping to have 60 out in the field by the end of the school year. So that is really positive too, because that's something that we've focused on with them. In terms of the advisory groups, I'm on the personnel one there. We had been meeting also with a couple of the other groups, continuing to update benefit summaries and agreements, which I'll thank Mrs. Lease very much for her leadership here in personnel, helped me develop those skills to be able to take those over there, and I think it's been a help for them as well. So thank you for all of that guidance, Mrs. Lease. Yeah, so that's where we are with Western, and the next meeting will not be until January 8th because of the holiday on the 2nd. So I believe it's going to be on Zoom, from what I understand, and that was a wrap for that meeting.
Can I just add one?
Oh, it will be in person. It will be in person.
Can I just add one point? I thought this was worth highlighting in terms of that audit report that they conducted. The number one answer from the students, they asked, what do you like best about the school? And the number one answer was the teachers. So that says a lot because of how experienced and dedicated their staff is. And I really just thought it was great to highlight that particular question.
That, and they also had said when we were in the group meeting and the debriefing of it, they commented about how it was very good to see the students were engaged at all different places. They weren't idle, they weren't just doing whatever, they weren't on their phones, they were actually engaged in whatever program that they were in. So, and they were looking to see, are they on their phones? Are they, kind of squirreling away? Are they doing that? But they were not. So that was positive too. And I think indicative of that comment about the teachers engaging them, working to engage them. So I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Is Upper Perk increasing their contribution to the operating costs?
Not yet. It's a five-year average. Is that right, Mr. Fitzgerald?
I believe that's for capital expenditures, that's the formula. It's, I think, 3 for daily membership.
Well, we're not going to hit that number because I think now that Springford is aware that they'll do something to step that up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Mrs. Deardorff, Legislative Committee, and then PSBA.
So it's interesting that we're meeting now on the 27th, so a lot, updates were provided to me on November 15th and then again on November 20th, and so now it's almost, a week later. So there is a very lengthy update that I sent to you all, and I'm happy to share with anyone in the community if they want all the detailed points about it. But, the big piece that's still out there, considering talking about budget planning for next year already starting, is that there's still remaining budget items that haven't been distributed yet to our schools. So House Bill 304 is still out there. That House bill proposed amendments, including school code language to distribute the remaining budget items, including Social Security reimbursement, Ready to Learn block grant funds, and school safety grants. The amendments also intend to extend the classroom monitor program and continue local flexibility with certifications and substitute teachers. There's a significant increase in the amount of tax credits to be made available to educational improvement scholarship organizations. And then last week, there was a big flurry of activity to be able to address that school code language. And the main vehicle is that House Bill 301. That House bill did pass the Senate 45-5, but the House rejected the amended bill. So now the legislature has adjourned until December 11th. So the original Senate bill is still pending as well, which has a lot of the same provisions as House Bill 301. It's like 3 pages of the main points of it, but we do expect that this to be the starting point for negotiations when the legislature does return. So it's, it was funny, I think somebody had commented, I think Mr. Fink did, about planning, for the not knowing what we're going to be getting next year, and I said, well, we still didn't even get everything that we're owed for this year. A lot of those decisions have not been made. So again, if anybody wants the very detailed specifics of all of those things that are included in that House bill, I'm happy to share them, but in the essence of time, I'm not going to read through them to everybody right now. And then the other piece to that is of note, there was a Pennsylvania education tour, which was led by Representative Jordan Harris and Representative Peter Schweier. They came to Montgomery County on November 16th. They went to North Penn, they went to Souderton, and to the MCIU, which sounds like it would have been a great event. And that's all that I have for legislative.
Thank you. Any questions on legislative before we move on to PSBA? Go ahead.
Actually, I have a question regarding the House bill, and this is actually for Mr. Fink, I think. The grants, these are grants, I believe, some of these that we were awarded, but we haven't gotten the money yet from, if I recall, the safety, the school safety, and the mental health one. If I'm right with that, can you talk about, have we spent that money that, and are, how, do you know anything about that?
Well, those monies are included in our regular operating budget. So the issue really comes down to, as Mrs. Deardorff was talking about, is getting that appropriations bill or the spending part of the budget done. We don't foresee any issue with that probably until like March or April, when we would start feeling some sort of impact of that. So.
Okay, so the money, even though it hasn't come in yet, we've allocated, it would be anything we would have purchased based on that would come out of like the general fund with the anticipation that when that funding becomes available from the state, it is paid to us. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, PSBA, Mrs. Deardorff.
So we did have the delegate assembly that Dr. Wright did already speak about. I was unable to attend due to a death in the family, but Mr. Jackson and Ms. Hermans did attend virtually as well. So thank you all for covering for me, and exciting to have Dr. Wright report out on the piece from the perspective of the MCIU. PSBA activity right now, they're talking about some, it's in your email, speakers for their annual conference, webinars that are offered regarding cybersecurity, again, looking for stories about PA great schools. And then there is a lot of information coming right now about the required school board director training, and part of that with the onboarding of our new members. But that really is all I have from the PSBA liaison part. And again, with this and legislative, I know, kind of piggying back to legislative, their next meeting is going to be on December 6th. And I believe Representative Greg Scott will be there to talk about some educational pieces. We don't have a PSBA meeting per se. I know there are some members of our school, our Montgomery County community that would like to have that. So, considering, I don't know if I will be on legislative or PSBA going into the new year, but just some points to consider. Thanks. Do you have anybody want to add anything about the delegate assembly? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, Mr. Schaefer, American Legion.
Thank you. The American Legion, Spring City American Legion met on October the 26th at Borough Hall. This time of the year, they talk about their future plans for the investments within the stadium, and so obviously what's on the agenda tonight's been very important to them. So they're meeting this Thursday, so please enable me to deliver this wonderful news for this Thursday's meeting. But that's about it. It's again outside of the season, and they're just looking at the capital investments like they do normally at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mr. Rizzo, Superintendent.
Thank you. Last Tuesday, the 21st, Spring-Ford was featured nationally on Good Morning America at around 7:30, 7:35 a.m. So I want to provide a little context for what that was all about. The PA Treasury, in collaboration with Good Morning America, reached out to Spring-Ford to do a feel-good piece and promote their unclaimed property program. Unclaimed property is unclaimed or abandoned property, most commonly in the form of money owed to an individual, organization, or business. Apparently, several years ago, 2 checks made out to Spring-Ford generated by one of our vendors was sent to a former local tax collector. These checks, totaling $231,000, never made their way to Spring-Ford, and we were not made aware of those. As part of their feel-good piece, Good Morning America and the Treasury identify potential business or organization with large sums of money. The Treasury conducted an internal search, and upon discovering this large sum of money owed to us, they reached out, along with Good Morning America, reached out to us to notify us of the funds and their intent to feature us in a segment in Good Morning America. Because these funds were initially taxpayer funds, the board will have to determine how to best utilize them. Some districts, some businesses have received this money and said, this is what we're going to do. As stewards of taxpayer funds, the board has to make a decision on what that's going to look like. Since these are one-time funds, our team has some thoughts on how to support students, and we would engage in a process to prioritize requests. But again, the board has to initiate that process for how they would like us to use those funds. So at some point, I'm going to need some direction from the board if this to be referred to committee or discussed at the board level. My recommendation would probably be to go to committee first, but I leave it to the board to weigh in on that.
Bring it to finance.
Bring it to finance, that's what he
Yeah.
says. Yep.
Thank you. Certainly, we are thankful to the Treasury and Good Morning America for that feel-good piece. Certainly made this superintendent's mom smile. Moving on, our kind of exciting, our bittersweet seems to be the word tonight, our bittersweet report retirees. We have 2 retirees that are going to be leaving us at the end of the year. Karen Russo, Brook Elementary teacher with 35 years of service, and Barry Ziegler, maintenance supervisor and foreman with 28 years of service. Collectively, these two retirees have served our community for 63 total years. We thank them for their service to Springford and for having a positive impact on so many of our young learners. We wish them best in their next phase, and that is the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. Any questions or comments?
I have two things. I just wanted to check in with Mr. Fink and make sure that he does, that there's, no additional $230,000 outstanding to the district that he doesn't know about. So I'm fully confident that he's dotting all the T's and crossing all the I's to make sure that that won't happen again. So I'm excited that that money is here back in the district, and fully confident that under Mr. Fink's steadfastness with the budget, we won't be missing money like that again. So that's exciting. I also wanted to recognize Mrs. Russo and her retirement. So much, Mrs. Sowski, much like your presence and your voice during COVID was a steadfast constant. For me, I had that experience with Mrs. Russo. My son was in kindergarten when COVID hit, so when they got back into school for first grade, she was his first grade teacher while we were all online during Zoom. And it was an uncertain time for all of us, and she exuded confidence in a very, very uncertain time. And her voice, still to this day, when I see her at Brooke, I'm like, her voice could bring me to tears because of just the comfort that she brought to me as a parent. So, she prides herself as being one of the originals from Brooke, from when that school was built. So I'm very thankful that I have had two students with her, and I wish her and all of our retirees the best of luck. But I couldn't let it go without saying that still that voice, that her calming and confident presence there's no words to express what that meant to our family. So thank you, Mrs. Russo.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Deardorff. Any other questions or comments? Moving on to our solicitor's report, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Good evening. Just a brief couple of items that came up over the last month. And I shared this with board leadership. There was a significant case out of the Commonwealth Court about a month ago involving the Sunshine Act. For those of you who remember, about 2 years ago, the law was changed that required all agendas to be final and complete 24 hours before a business meeting. And that was changed from the past. In the past, it was a free-for-all. You could do anything you want at the board table. There were 4 exceptions, or at least we all thought there were 4 exceptions to this 24-hour rule, essentially 2 of which were de minimis changes to the agenda. A third was for health, safety, and welfare, a really significant issue. And then we thought there was this 4th, this catch-all, like as long as you followed a process, you could amend the agenda. And we may have done that once or twice, but I certainly know a lot of districts had been utilizing that practice. Well, the Commonwealth Court came back and said about a month ago, you can't do that. And in other words, you have your 3 options, these de minimis, low-level things that you can add to the agenda, or it has to be for a real emergency. Otherwise, if you don't get it on the agenda within the or before the 24-hour deadline, it can't be taken or placed on the agenda for consideration. I think it's a big deal because I think districts had relied on this process to amend as needed. So we'll hopefully see how that plays out over the next few years. There's concern in Montgomery County about the delay of certification of elections. Now, this is an every 2-year thing in Montgomery County, but I would note that there seems to be heightened concern this year that there's going to be a delay in those certifications. In a worst case scenario, we would have to delay the reorganization meeting. The newly elected members of the board have to have that to the district in advance of any sort of swearing in. It happens from time to time. Montgomery County tends to be one of those counties where we're going to be getting them next Monday. But I just wanted to note that for future consideration. And then finally, there is an action item tonight involving the library. I would ask that we simply have this agenda item subject to final review of my office. We are waiting on a response from the library to language that we shared with them about 3 weeks ago. It's just clarifying language, and we hope to get that back, but we would like to have it approved subject to final review of that language.
I was just facetiously saying to Mr. Rizzo, I said, does that require an amendment?
No, we just need to note that for the minutes that
Okay.
we're doing that.
Good.
And for what it's worth, if we ever have to amend actual items on the agenda, we can continue to do that. That has not been impacted. It would be when we're just adding something completely new to the agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, Mr. Fitzgerald, you said a lot about Montgomery County, but where does it currently stand now?
Where it stands is the county has indicated to some inquiring school districts that there's a delay in the certification. I don't know whether that means this is a few days, whether it could be later this week, whether it's a more significant issue. We had this issue come up with a district that we represent in Lehigh County 2 years ago, where the certifications did not come in, I believe, until the first week of December, and they had to delay their reorganization meetings throughout the county. I hope we don't get to that point, but I just want to at least alert the board to the concerns that we're hearing from other districts in the county.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so now we're moving on to the voting portion of our meeting, and just for clarification for the public, while we did not have a work session, as we typically do in the month, we have the work session where we discuss, and then we have the voting meeting. A lot of these action items, specifically under finance and under property and curriculum and so forth, have been discussed in committee, so we are going to go through, and of course, if any board members have additional questions, feel free to raise them at questions and discussion. So moving on to section 4 minutes, letters A and B. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Second. Questions and discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Personnel, section 5, letters A through J. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay. Questions and discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Moving on to section 6, finance, letters A through T. I'll give it a moment to see if anyone wants to separate anything. Do I have a motion? Or actually, let me give you a minute, like I said I was going to do.
Are we separating I based on the commentary from Mr. Fitzgerald?
No, we don't need to, Mr. Jackson. We're just going to note that it is subject to final review.
What did I say? M. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions and discussion?
I just briefly, I just want to say Spring City Elementary looks like the place to be. There's a bunch of assemblies happening, so noted that. Good stuff.
We can go there.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Section 7, property, letter A. Do I have a motion? A second?
Second.
Okay. Questions and discussion?
I have a question regarding this. It says that the funding comes from the capital reserve and then to be repaid from the school safety operating budget. Could someone explain to me why it's being done that way? I'm not doubting it's for good reason, just asking.
Certainly. This is part of the security 10-year plan, and it is factored into both the capital reserve plan and through the security's operating budget for the next coming years, stacking the improvements to the security systems within those buildings. So typically what we would do is we would fund it out of the capital reserve initially, and then over time, whatever the life of the asset is, repay that. So when it's time to re-update or repurchase new items. The money's in the account, ready to do so again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Moving on to Section 8, Programming and Curriculum, letters A through M. Again, I'll give you a moment to see if you want to separate anything. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, questions and discussion?
So most of these items are coming out of Senate District, the Structural Literacy Grant. So when this money is used up, none of these programs will be, I know she asked it. Okay, well.
Microphone, go ahead.
Katie said that the teachers will be trained, so that won't have to be repeated, and we don't have to buy the materials again. So it is a one-time grant, but we only need it one time for it to be effective and for us to continue to use it, was my takeaway from what she had said. Because you're right, there's a lot on there, and that's what I said too.
So let me just finish my point. So all of these items that we're introducing, we're sitting here saying, once it's used up, we're not going back down this road again with any of these programs.
That's, I think what they were saying is that we're still going to have this programming, but we're not going to have the resources to pay for things, people to be retrained, and we won't have to pay for the materials unless they were to be damaged or lost in some way, so that the program would still continue. We just don't need the funds to continue it. Is that correct?
Yes, it's not an annual renewal that we would have a recurring cost. Now, somewhere along the line, we might need to look at replacing materials, at which case that would have to be budgeted within the typical curriculum cycle, within the curriculum budget. But it's not an annual renewal cost where we would, for us, it would be a one-time cost without that annual renewal.
Could you actually talk about the grant and the purpose of the grant and why we're using it how we are?
Sure. The purpose of the grant is to increase what's called structured literacy, and making sure that our teachers are trained and able to understand and apply the practices of structured literacy. So the goal of this is to be both professional development, have money to use for professional development as well as materials. So it's kind of split both ways.
So could you apply for this grant going forward also?
I believe it's a one-time cost. Katie, am I correct in that? Thank you. One-time grant. Okay.
This just sounds too good to be true, so bear with me. So we will train teachers who will not need to be trained in the future, but what about new teachers? I'm just asking the question. So new teachers that are hired, they will require training. So are we going to have in-house training, or is it going to be outsourced training with a cost?
Many of these programs are programs that we've had to pay for in the past. As example, the Wilson training, the reading specialist certification, that is a one-time, this is a very unique opportunity. Typically, teachers have to go through this program on their own with some tuition reimbursement under the collective bargaining agreement. The other items are physical, tangible materials that would be utilized through the reading specialist or special education teachers. Is there an item in particular that you have a question about?
No, I'm just looking at, it's like 8 different items here. And if we're saying that this is a one-time cost, which I don't believe, but I hear what you're saying, there will be costs in the future to support these programs.
Just as a frame of reference, in our curriculum budget, there's a line item of about $90,000 that we do utilize for intervention materials. So if we were to need something different, that would be an item that's already planned for. These items were specific related to what was identified from the Senate district that we were allowed to submit from or select from. So these were items and products that we already either were utilizing in some capacity already or expanding a program. I'm just looking at letter F as an example. We've already purchased Hegarty for grades K to 2, which is part of our Tier 1 instruction for all students. This program would provide students in grades 3 and 4 that are not meeting that proficiency level in those skills additional time and resources for intervention. Teachers are doing that already, but creating their own resources, creating their own products. This would be a continuum of service from K to 4.
And just for the record, I support what we're doing. I just want to make sure that everyone has the same understanding. So if I look at item L, that says total cost not to exceed $100,000. So I don't know that your $90,000 is going to cover all these if there's a line item.
What's the total amount
here?
I think there's some context missing from where this money is coming from. And if I'm correct, is this from October of 2022? Yes. So to provide, this is money that our state senator worked to obtain this is like money coming from Pennsylvania to help our district. So in October of 2022, Senator Muth, this grant was funded through Pennsylvania's allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funds to be distributed to Chester County Intermediate Unit and facilitate the program for the school districts in Senate District 44 against Chester, Montgomery, and Berks counties. This is an exciting announcement for our schools. So this is money that our elected officials are working for to obtain for our school to flourish and obtain some trainings that we don't currently have that will ultimately benefit our students. I hear you loud and clear saying that where's the continuum of this, but I think this is an amazing opportunity to use a lot of money that we didn't have to put into these services that we wouldn't want to miss. And I applaud the fact that we will be using each other as resources to continue this education for new teachers and additional teachers to come. I wouldn't want to see this money go to waste, but by not using it, that's something that occurs with all grants. But I think the context behind this is important because it's the Commonwealth working for us and giving something back to us. It seems like there's a lot of unfunded mandates and things like that come through, and opportunities that we have to provide without funding, and to have some funding coming in through our elected officials working for us. I think that is great.
That's not I'm not looking at
Because this is money from a year ago, so I think it's important to understand kind of where it's coming from.
And I appreciate Ms. Dierdorf. I'm looking down the road. I'm not looking at now. So that's what my questions are predicated on going forward. So I thank you, and we'll just monitor it going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and just, Mrs. Gardy, I see that your light is on. So
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Jackson with the question about letter L. That would be a one-time. That is an example of something that we would not be able to do beyond a grant. This was very specific to this grant, giving the opportunity to pay for the tuition for the certification for reading specialists. That's what letter L represents. That is not something that we've done in the past, nor would I expect to do that in the future.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments with programming, Section 8, letters A through M? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 8-0. Moving on to conferences and workshops, Section 9, letters A through E. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second? I guess that was a second. Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 8-0. Moving on to Section 10, other business. We're looking at letters B, C, and D. A is a first read. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries 8-0. Section 11 is an informational item that the board has reviewed and supports the superintendent and assistant superintendent goals for the 2023-24 school year. And just for public record, these goals have been in front of the board for quite a while now, I would say, going back to the start of the school year. They've been referenced in various board memos, so this is not the first time that we've seen it, but just wanted to let the board know, of course, we've had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Rizzo if there were any concerns with that, but we are just publicly posting that they have been reviewed and we are in support of them. Okay, moving on to board comment.
I have something quickly.
Okay.
It was brought to my attention that I may not have been clear in one of my comments. I just wanted to clarify that I was not being tongue-in-cheek or sarcastic in any way, that I am fully confident moving forward with Mr. Fink in his expertise with our budget, that we wouldn't have an outstanding amount of so high out there in the community not coming back to us. And so that is, I am truly confident in that, and that situation did occur prior to him being here. So I just wanted to clarify that, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other? So Mrs. Weingarten?
I just have a quick note. I wanted to thank Mr. Reese from the American Legion. He was kind enough to invite me over to the ball field and give me a tour of a lot of the improvements that are going on, some of the things that they plan for the future, and what an amazing partnership and investment they've made in the Spring-Ford baseball program and the American Legion, the Spring City Red Sox. And I did. I was there.
I don't know who you plan on putting in on the, but I'm just saying there's a lead candidate here.
No, I'm just saying I'm very thankful for the opportunity to do a walkthrough and learn a lot about baseball and see those improvements and the things that they're looking forward to doing going forward. So I'm happy that that passed as well.
Mrs. Weingarten, do you have any other board comment to share?
I do. You want to help me with that thing?
I was waiting for it.
So Dave's going to help unveil this, as we've used it as a coat rack. Hold on, we'll bring it up. Bring it up.
So this is long awaited. When did we start talking about this?
Last year.
Last year, obviously, but I feel like it was
It's still not finished.
quite a while. So while they're bringing this up, if you guys recall, in community relations, we had the Spring-Ford Booster Club share information on their fundraising initiative, which was Ram Country. And you've probably seen some Rams popping up across the community at Brook Elementary, Limerick, UPE, at McNally Stadium. And at the time, there was a lot of questions on if the board would move forward with getting a RAM done for the district office. After negotiations, we did all agree. And Mrs. Weingarten has, over the last year, been working on painting this RAM. So I am so glad that she can unveil it for you at this last meeting. It is a girl. And
wow. Thank you.
And there is, yes, wonderful Mrs. Weingarten.
It looks like it's smiling.
It's like staring at me. I don't know,
And I'll say there also, of course, is a plaque. And I believe that with the funds, we sprung for the bigger size plaque so we can get everybody's name on this in front of the district office.
My husband will be very happy to get that out of our garage, the plaque, so just let me know.
Okay, I have board comment.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay.
Jackson.
All right, where do I start? I'll start with the easy ones. Dr. Motzer, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving of yourself. Like I always tell people, when you run or you're appointed, your family runs, your family is involved, and you've had time away from your family for the last 18 months. You went through a very interesting process, which I can relate to, my first time. So thank you for supporting us. A lot of people will sit back and they'll be on social media and they have an answer for everything. But when the time comes to step up to the plate, most people don't. You did, and I am truly appreciative for you doing that and being a part of the board for the last 18 months. So enjoy, go back and be with your family, but thank you for your time. Mr. Schaefer, my neighbor, in the hood together. We've been through a lot together, including our daughters. So I also thank you for your dedication. And sometimes we say it's not easy. It is easy. You step up and you do it. And that is what you've done on 2 different occasions. You were smart enough to come back for a second round of it. And truly appreciate that. And happy to call you my friend. So thank you, sir, for your time.
Appreciate that.
All right. This is going to be a crazy one. Ms. Rosowski. Our journey goes back to March of 2023. And it was, March of 2013. It was a stormy night that we were doing interviews here. And Ms. Rosowski could not come to the interview. That 4 of us were applying for a seat that Julie Mullen stepped away from to run for tax collector. And she had a big tree in her driveway, so she could not make it, and she had to do the interview over the phone. And I said it then, and I'll say it now, that was an awful interview. It was horrible. Worse than Zoom. And when the dust cleared, I was selected for that seat for those 2 years. And then in 2025, we had to run against each other. 2015, 10 years ahead, 2015, we had to run against each other. You beat me. I still have hard feelings about that, just for the record. 2017, some kind of way the universe connected us at the hip, and we didn't have to run against each other. It was more because we were on a different election cycle at that time, and there would be no rematch, so we were sort of stuck together. So we've been together for the last 6 years. There were times you irritated me, most times. There were some times I irritated you, never, but I've always had respect for you. 2019, I had the pleasure of talking with your daughters, and they said, please, Mr. Jackson, don't let her run again because she's never home. And I said, take that and run with it. And they said, yes, thank you, she's not going to be home. So in November of 2019, little did we know what was coming around the corner. 2020, the time you wanted to be president.
I didn't know.
It was a tough time for the board, for the district, for the Commonwealth, for the country. But you stood tall. Even with a couple of books underneath you, you stood tall. It is an honor that most people will never have and never want. You provided leadership during some turbulent times, and for that, I say thank you, Madam President.
Hear, hear.
I am happy to call you my friend. You've been at this for 8 years. That's a long time. Unfortunately, I still have 2 more to go. But this is it is perfect that I have the opportunity to send you away, send you off, enjoy your family, and take a break. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll make this. Oh, okay.
I heard what Mr. Yumchuck said, and I thought that was a general comment. I wasn't aware that there were any specifics to teachers not having supplies or students not having supplies. So that's something we can look at, but I was not aware of that. The only other item is next year I want to have 2 meetings in November. This was a lot and it's 10 o'clock. So to the board members that are leaving and we get to keep Dr. Wright, enjoy your time away. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and take care of yourself. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other board comment? Okay, I'm just going to quickly do one thing, which was, it really wasn't the time for me to do this when I was at the podium earlier, but Mrs. Zazowski, you did mention homecoming, and I know that you've been a big proponent of that. I know it was heartbreaking for you not to be there this year, but you were with your daughters, which was wonderful. I did make this for you, knowing that I don't know where you're going to put, maybe the barn. Where are you going to put this? You'll put it somewhere, but this was basically the banner. You want to open this up? This was the banner that was on our float this year, and it has everybody's names and a picture of Springford. And
I love it.
I just thought you would appreciate that as a parting gift. So thank you for instilling the camaraderie and the homecoming love. Mrs. Weingarten has big shoes to fill next year. But you know, who knows? We'll have some guest people ride the float. So.
You
All
forgot
right.
you forgot the L in my name, but
Okay.
it's gonna be a marker. I'll put it in.
Next year, I put you in charge of making the banner.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, if there isn't any other board comment, we'll move on to public to be heard. This can be on any item, not the agenda specifically, so please approach a podium with your name and township of residence.
My name is Dennis Reese, and I'm from Upper Providence Township. I want to make just 3 brief comments. First, as a citizen and taxpayer, I want to acknowledge the retirees and the comments that have been made by the board. You know, much better, more articulate, more thorough than I could add, but I do want to say, from sitting in the audience, you know, you have a heck of a job. Everybody does their best, striving to move the school district forward. And to that, you deserve a wealth of thanks. Second, as a representative of Spring City American Legion, we've been in Rams Stadium, I think, since about 1996 or 97. We played our first game there in 99. And it's been a great relationship between the school district and the Legion. And we're very happy that, you know, you've had the wisdom to extend our lease to 2036. And to that, you know, I just want to express my personal gratitude and also the gratitude of the American Legion Board of Directors. And my final comment is as a veteran. Earlier this month, I attended 2 assemblies at the 5th grade and 7th grade centers. And I don't know if any of you have attended those, but I would highly encourage you to go to any of the 3. I didn't go to the 6th grade, I just went to the 5th and the 7th grade. The work that the principals and their staffs put into those assemblies is very moving and very touching, to the point that, you know, they addressed me as an individual, you know, my military service and so on and so forth. I'm just one of many. But, you know, that is something I think our youth has to be introduced to. And those 2 principals, again, I can't address the 6th grade, just the 5th and the 7th, they did a great job. And again, I would encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity, please take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese.
Good evening. My name's Kelly Volpe, Upper Providence. I wanted to speak to you tonight on agenda item 8, items C through L. I've had the chance to speak to several board members and about my role in the development of the structured literacy grant program in Senate District 44. The structured literacy grant program was born out of my experience advocating for my reading disabled children in this district. I had the opportunity to work with the Chester County IU, Senator Muth's office, and Everyone Reads Pennsylvania to act as an early contributor to the development of the grant. And it was our hope that we would provide for professional development of teachers in service of children in our community. While a lot of our PSSA data is to be applauded, I would encourage the board to continue asking questions of all the cohorts representing students in this district, specifically those with IEPs, and look at educational outcomes for those children. It was our hope with the development of this grant that educational outcomes not be dictated by parental income and education level, and that we provide teachers the training they need to support all students in this district. I wanted to thank Mrs. Gardy for the work that she's done in the rollout of our new CKLA curriculum, and also the work she's done in applying for and working with Senator Muth's office and the CCIU for this particular grant. I look forward to reviewing the data that comes out of the audit as part of the grant and the pre and post data. Mr. Jackson, to address some of your concerns earlier, there were legislative changes made in 2022 that mandate all K-8 educators during their pre-service training, reading specialists, special education teachers, and teachers of English language learners receive training in the science of reading during their undergraduate degrees. The curriculum for pre-service training has to be aligned with the knowledge and practice standards of the International Dyslexia Association as of August 1st, 2024. So the training that is being provided to teachers as part of this grant program, a version of it will be provided to teachers during pre-service. So by 2028, 29, 30, the teachers that we are onboarding should have a lot of this training as part of their undergraduate. That is all. I'm happy to answer any questions on the grant that remain outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John Yonchuk, Limerick. Once again, I was moved a little bit by all the discussion tonight of our retiring board members, so I wanted to say again thank you. There's been a lot of slings and arrows over the last few years, but I think we're all coming from, a place where we want to help all the students. With that in mind, and I hope I'm remembering these details correctly, but I wanted to just leave us all on a note. I think most of you know my view on what a public institution is. I speak at the podium often. I wouldn't say I knew Mrs. Earle well, but I did have a chance a few times to meet with her in person and discuss, various issues with her. And what I really took as an inspiration from her was that she wasn't a local. She didn't grow up here. She didn't have kids in the district. But she did say she just felt like because she could, she wanted to give back to our community. She felt it was her responsibility. She didn't ask what she was getting from it. She didn't ask how she would benefit. She just simply felt that it was her duty as a citizen to really give back now that she could. So I'm going to miss her. Everyone, I think, kind of gave a much better talk than I could, but that was sort of the one thing that stuck in my head, so I thought I'd leave everyone with that note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Lair. I live on Washington Street in Royersford, and this is Heidi Ciano. She lives on Thornberry Way in Limerick. We are here from SNAP, the After Prom Committee, Planning Committee. We're a 501c3 actually at this point. And the board has been extremely, and administration has been extremely supportive of us in the past, but we have urgent information to share. I'm going to read it because 5 of our board members have agreed to this wording, so I'm going to read from here on. We want to make sure that you understand that due to lack of resources, this year's post-prom party will likely be canceled, a determination to be made by the end of next week. We have been pressing for increased involvement, including fundraising and leadership, for several years now and are at a crossroads. We have one more grant to hear about in the coming days, but without that, this year's event will not be able to be held. In the big picture, we do need to be sure that the community values a post-prom event. We passionately want SNAP's mission to continue, but after years of trying to keep it going, the funding and support for this year's event is sorely lacking. If the Spring-Ford community considers a post-prom party an integral part of keeping students and communities safe, we need immediate financial support for this year's event to run so that we can seek leadership and volunteers to continue SNAP's mission in 2025. Please contact us at sfsnap@gmail.org with any solutions or questions.
Thank you. Any other
I know we
folks?
typically don't, discussion, whatever, but could we announce at this time what the best way, if people, did want to make a donation or support? I know some fundraisers have been put, the marketing of these things is immense. I see it all the time. So that information is out there, but what would an immediate way, if someone did want to provide a donation or financial impact, what would be the best way for that? Is there a link on the Facebook page? What would you prefer?
On sfsnap.org, there is a pay button. You can also reach out to Heidi or I by clicking on the contact information there. There's several ways to make that happen, and we're very reachable and get back to people right away.
So,
Thank you so much.
So just for some historical perspective, this board has supported SNAP in the past from this table. I think Colleen, you're on the board, so is I. So we have contributed to SNAP in the past, and I think last time it was $10,000.
Locally and financially, we
Yes.
have always supported SNAP here. Interesting that there's some found money, and I will say nothing more.
Mrs. Lair, do you know how many students attended in the last year or two?
Last year was 250.
Ballpark is okay.
Last year was
Guys,
250, and the year before that was roughly 350. 300? 350.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and I apologize, please don't take this as a discounting of the issue, but we are in public comment, so I want to keep it to public comment, not board discussion. I think that if there is a desire for the board to talk about this, I think what I'm struggling with right now is hearing your public comment and hearing you say that you're making a decision next week, yet we don't have any committee meetings or board meetings until January to be able to have a discussion is the issue. And I don't think right now at the end of public comment is the time to have that conversation, so maybe we can discuss that separately, but right now, I don't know that there's anything further, but thank you.
I was just sharing what's been done in the past.
Oh, I appreciate that, yep. I just don't want it to devolve into a discussion or at this point, so.
There should be an offline conversation.
Correct. So with that said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Okay, meeting ended.